All right, this one's for the ladies, for your protection and your safety. I really need you to listen up because this one is super important, okay? I have personal experience for this. I can attest that this has happened to me several times. Okay, here we go. If a man finds out you're traumatized by another man and you're not quite over that trauma yet and you're still processing it, and he finds out about it, this new man finds out about your trauma, you better believe that he will likely take advantage of it and traumatize you all over again, traumatize you some more, and leave you worse off than what he found you. I don't know why this is a thing, but many men will take advantage of you if he finds out you're traumatized and you're not quite in a better place yet. It's best just to take as much time as you need to heal and work on your trauma, because if you try to get love from another man hoping that that'll help heal you, it doesn't work out that way. It just does not work out that way. He will in some way take advantage of the situation, take advantage of your vulnerability, and treat you maybe even worse than the man before him treated you. I know there's hundreds and hundreds and millions of other women who can share stories. If you want to share yours below, feel free. But I definitely have experienced this in my last 2 relationships. I had the next man who came along after being so hurt, really made me feel like he was going to be the hero. Really made me feel like he was going to help pick up the pieces. And in fact, he helped create more pieces. He took advantage of my vulnerability and kind of got what he wanted out of the situation, and then broke my heart and took advantage of me and emotionally abused me, trauma bonded me, and really, really hurt me. And I know I'm not the only one with this type of story. I know my story is not unique. Unfortunately, this happens. I don't know what it is in men. It's like they sense blood in the water and they become like sharks, and they have to go for it. You know, we are like prey to them. Many women are men's prey. You know, they are literally predators. You know, this happens in humanitarian situations. This happens in war zones. You know, the men who come as helpers will end up taking advantage of the women they're coming to help. Here's a following story of, you know, this happening. You know, it's just, you know, we've got to keep it in our minds that very many men are predators. Just be so careful when you choose your partner. Really get to know them. Work on your trauma first before you get into any new relationships, because so many men will be predatory and take advantage of you. All right, check out this story. I think you'll be interested in hearing it. This is just unfortunately how many men act on their predatory nature. All right, keep rising phoenixes and just be careful with yourself. Heal your trauma before you get into any future relationships. Love yous. Watch this story. Bye.
When the men come, set yourself on fire. That is a line from a poem called In Love and in War by the Somali British poet Warsan Shire. And as a former humanitarian aid worker, no line in a poem has ever hit me as hard as that one did. I have responded to all manner of emergencies. I've responded to floods, I've responded to earthquakes, I've responded to civil unrest. And in each of those scenarios, part of my job as a humanitarian aid worker was to speak to people who had survived these emergencies and document their stories for case studies so that we could raise awareness of what was going on, and also so that we could raise money for the charities that I was working for. I have spoken to a lot of people who have been fleeing emergency situations, and everyone's story was different and every situation was different depending on what was going on, but there was one common theme that ran through absolutely everything. No matter what had happened, whether it was natural disaster or civil war, men had come and harmed women. Men had seized their opportunity to harm women who were fleeing an emergency situation with their families in every single one of those situations. Now, you might think, okay, in civil unrest, we can understand that that might happen because of the nature of civil unrest, but it was every single situation, every single emergency situation. And it didn't end when the emergency ended, it continued. It continued when people were living in camps. It continued when people were moving around, because there was unrest in the country. Everything had fallen apart and men would seize their opportunity to harm women. And so the charity I was working with and the charities that we were partnered with would have to put programs in place to try and protect women from men. Like women who are fleeing an emergency situation and trying to stay alive would also have to think about the fact that they were in danger because men were actively looking to harm them in that situation. One of the most harrowing stories that I ever heard, and now is the time to scroll away if you don't think you can deal with this, was a man telling me that he had been forced to sit in a living room and listen to men in an upstairs bedroom raping his daughters. Because I have spoken to so many women in these emergency situations, and because I know about the things that happen to them, I know exactly what I would do if there was an emergency. And the first thing that I would do, and my one hard and fast rule, would be to stay as far away from men as possible. Right, in these situations, you can't even trust humanitarian aid workers, by the way. Like, you can look up the things that humanitarian aid workers have done to women in emergency situations. You can look up the things that soldiers have done to women in emergency situations. Like, even the men who are sent in to help cannot be trusted. I would not be attaching myself to a group of men hoping that that group of men would protect me from another group of men. That just wouldn't be happening. When the men come, set yourself on fire. I'm not for any minute suggesting that anybody sets themselves on fire, obviously, but what I am saying is that if anything ever happens, you can't trust men. You can't. There are millions of women worldwide who can attest to that, who've been in this situation and have had things happen to them. If something happens, you cannot trust men. Whenever I talk about the fact that I'm a former humanitarian aid worker, and the one constant I saw in every situation was men harming women, whether they were fleeing from a civil unrest or a natural disaster, men will come to the comment section and tell me that's because of the countries that I was working in, and it's because of the men in those countries and the way that they do not value women. If that's the case, then how do you explain Woodstock 99? There was chaos, and so men seized their opportunity to grape and essay women. How do you explain Hurricane Katrina? There was chaos, and so men seized their opportunity to harm women. How do you explain the fact that Jewish women were raped not only by their captors, but also by liberators who insisted that they owed them something for setting them free? And then they went on to live their lives as heroes and liberators, despite the fact that they had caused immense suffering and trauma to a group of women who had already been through more than anyone should ever have to go through, ever. Again, there was chaos, and so men seized their opportunity. How do you explain the fact that women of colour worldwide have been raising the alarm on humanitarian aid workers and what they are doing to beneficiaries for decades? What do you think an average humanitarian aid worker looks like? What do you think the humanitarian aid workers who are doing these things look like? How do you explain the fact that women soldiers are in more danger from their colleagues, their male colleagues doing things to them, than they are from the enemy when they are overseas? This isn't a men in a certain country problem. This is a man problem. It's a worldwide man problem. In the West, we see men seizing opportunities when women have had too much to drink. We see them administering their wives and girlfriends with substances, again, to lessen the chances that they will be caught doing something to those women. When the circumstances are right and there is chaos and there is stress and there is less chance of men being caught, there are more men who are willing to seize their opportunity than we are ready to discuss. This is not a men in a certain country problem. This is a man problem.